This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us. I'm Ephraim Graham. Ahead today, a huge strike against Israel as Gaza terrorists fire some 400 rockets at the Jewish state. And the Israeli leadership is planning its response. Here at home, the death toll continues to climb from those historic wildfires in California as thousands of firefighters are trying to stop the powerful blazes across the state. Plus, how the U.S. is planning to meet that immigrant caravan that's making its way north toward the border. Many migrants are claiming asylum, but are those claims valid? And we're going to have a look at how one rancher found himself the target of the government, facing enormous fines just because he put a pond on his property. All those stories and more are ahead in this half hour of CBN Newswatch. We want to begin, though, with the fighting in the Middle East as Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu met with his security cabinet today to decide how to respond to what's being called the largest single-day attack ever. As Chris Mitchell reports from southern Israel, the Jewish state sits on a knife's edge between a ceasefire or a war.
This is the sound of war in southern Israel. Gaza terrorists launched some 400 rockets at Israel. The Iron Dome anti-rocket system struck down about 100. Some fell inside populated areas. This is a building in Escalation that took a direct hit from one of the rockets fired out of Gaza about 12 miles to the south. You can see the walls that had been blown out. You can see this is the kitchen. You can see cookies in the cupboards. You can see the damage that had because of the rocket. A man in his 40s died because of this. 2 women were seriously injured. And this is just one of the hundreds of rockets that have been fired out of Gaza into Israel in the past 24 hours. First responders removed the man's body from the rubble. The barrage puts Israelis on edge. Biton Mamon lives next door.
The feeling is very bad. I have a father who is old, he's 19 years old, and he was terrible. Last night he was panic.
Israel police spokesman Mickey Rosenfeld said there are about 1 million Israelis affected by this current round of violence.
Well, the message to the public is to stay safe. When the sirens go off, there are 15 seconds or 30 seconds or 45 seconds to take cover.
The IDF responded by attacking some 150 Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad military targets in Gaza, including a Hamas television station and governmental structures.
I think we're in a difficult period at the moment. It could be 24 hours, 48 hours. It will pass. The IDF is doing everything they can. The Israeli National Police are protecting the civilians inside the populated areas, inside all the cities in the south.
The U.S. led the condemnation of the rocket barrages against Israel. Jason Greenblatt tweeted, Israel is forced once again into military action to defend its citizens. We stand with Israel as it defends itself against these attacks. As Israel teeters on the brink of war, Mamon said if it was up to him, he'd know what to do.
Tell Trump to tell Bibi and Lieberman to work to finish this area, Gaza. That's it. They don't want to live in peace. They choose blood.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Ashkelon, Israel.
Back here at home, the California wildfire disaster is now the deadliest in the state's history. The death toll rising to 44 overnight. The search for bodies in Northern California tells the story of attempts at escape. Rescue workers finding personal belongings or other items, burned out cars as well, apparently overcome by smoke and flames before those people could actually get away.
I'm surrounded by fire. I'm surrounded by fire right now. I don't know what to do.
It was just constant explosions, and cars are trying to go around on the side and bursting into flames, and people are getting out of their burning cars and running down the middle of the road.
Statewide, there are more than 8,000 firefighters battling wildfires, more than 7,000 structures destroyed, and roughly 325 square miles scorched between Camp Fire burning in Northern California and the Woolsey Fire in Southern California. Reporter Caitlin Burke is here now with more on this story. Many people probably don't even realize that there are fires burning in the north as well as the south. What's this doing to the state's resources?
They're stretched real thin. So statewide, there's about 8,000 firefighters at both fires in California. and especially the Woolsey fire. There have been 2 fatalities there, but in Northern California, there have been 42. And so they've really got a lot of resources in Northern California, and while they're getting the Woolsey fire under control, they're very stretched then down in Southern California.
Can only imagine. Are the winds a serious problem?
They are, and what firefighters are saying is they're very much still in fire conditions, dangerous conditions.
Yeah.
The wind is about 70 miles per hour. They're calling the state just a tinderbox.
It's unbelievable. So the death toll we see continues to climb. So are people still missing?
They are. So in Paradise, California and the surrounding areas, which is in Northern California, they're saying there's about 200 people missing, but they're also saying they may not really understand the scope of how many people are missing. So as rescue crews are going to these burnt out houses, they're saying that if there's no cars in the driveway, they're seeing that as a very good sign. And they're specifically going to the homes of people who have been reported missing. If there's 1 car in the driveway, they're a little bit concerned. If there are 2 burnt out cars in the driveway, they really spend a lot of time on those homes.
Tell us about the town of Paradise, California. How bad was the fire there?
That town is really kind of ground zero for this fire in Northern California. They're still investigating what the cause was. Some residents are reporting that their gas company actually called them a few days before the fire and said that they needed to send somebody out because there were reports of electricity boxes sparking. There's been no confirmed reports that that's what caused the fires, but that is being reported that, you know, those people are coming forward and saying that. But the town is really just burnt out.
Unbelievable. Caitlin Burke, thank you so much. She's following that story for us today. Much appreciated. Here's a look now at some of the other major stories we're following for you inside the CBN newsroom today. Democrat Kristen Sinema won Arizona's open U.S. Senate seat Monday, beating Republican Representative Martha McSally. The race between Sinema and McSally was one of the most closely watched in the nation during Arizona's lengthy vote count. Sinema declared victory Monday at a Scottsdale hotel, citing the example of John McCain, who died in August. She said she would try to follow his example and put country before party. U.S. analysts said Monday they have located 13 secret North Korean missile development sites. A report states satellite imagery shows an extensive network of weapons facilities used to produce missiles and related technology. North Korea analysts said the findings were not surprising, but were still cause for concern. They also noted that Kim Jong-un has not ever agreed to halt either nuclear weapons or missile development in his negotiations with President Donald Trump. Tim Tebow will now be the host of a 10-episode high-stakes physical competition show on CBS. During the $1 Million Mile, contestants will have a chance to win $1 million every time they run the course. Tebow says watching people compete at their highest ability is inspirational to him. And you can find these and other stories throughout the day at cbnnews.com. House Democrats are making their priorities clear for when they take over come January. One of them will be challenging Acting Attorney General Matt Whitaker and his authority over Special Counsel Robert Mueller's Russia investigation.
He should recuse himself for any review of the investigation because of statements he has made already in the public domain.
Some charge Whitaker's appointment is unconstitutional because he has not been approved by the Senate, but Trump advisor Kellyanne Conway says the president's attorneys approved it. While the Democrats are not talking about impeachment, they're expected to launch multiple investigations into the Trump administration. Congressman Adam Schiff told Axios on HBO Democrats will investigate if the president used instruments of power to punish the press. Coming up, the number of illegal immigrants coming into America has been shooting up. That is creating a major problem for the U.S. Border Patrol, and the migrant caravan that's heading north through Mexico is only making the situation worse. We're going to have that story when we come back. The number of immigrants illegally crossing into America with their families is skyrocketing. In October, more than 23,000 parents and children were caught at the southern border. That is 40% higher than any month on record. A growing number of those migrants are coming here seeking political asylum. That's creating a serious crisis for Border Patrol agents who have to deal with this surge. And as Chuck Holton shows us, the approaching caravan will only make matters worse.
In 2017 alone, More than 330,000 migrants made asylum claims, and less than 40% of those were found to have merit. The current system has been unable to keep up with the flood of asylum seekers, which has led to a backlog of more than 800,000 cases, according to the DHS. Now, with several large caravans making their way north to the U.S. border, the Trump administration is deploying more than 7,000 troops to help. Their commander, Northcom General Terrence O'Shaughnessy, recently toured the South Texas border to see the need firsthand.
We've been given a very important task to help harden the ports of entry and try to make sure that our Customs and Border personnel can handle the vast numbers that we're expecting to see in this migration.
Okay, so this is downtown El Paso. We're right on the border fence here. That's Juarez, Mexico, across the Rio Grande there. You can see the river is very shallow right now. You can walk right across it very easily, and many people do. They do that in this area a lot because this fence is what they call the old tortilla curtain. It's so easy to breach in today's environment that it needs to be replaced, and that's actually exactly what they're doing. If you look over here to my right, you can see some construction going on. That's them in the process of installing new and much more substantial fence, but that's not part of Trump's border wall. The reason that they're putting this in now is because this area has become really, really busy with migrants crossing illegally, and when they do that, it's extremely expensive for the American taxpayer.
I mean, we're starting to see diseases that we hadn't seen in decades here. Smallpox, chickenpox, all of that. You add that to the cost of the removal proceedings. You add that to the dangers that we as a community face, and people don't realize that.
The Trump administration recently announced a new measure to discourage illegal border crossers. Anyone caught entering the country illegally will not be eligible for asylum. It's a controversial move, but it doesn't mean the migrants will be turned away. The military on the border is working long hours to help the Border Patrol prepare to handle thousands of legal asylum seekers.
Specifically, they're initially looking for that engineering capability that will allow us to harden the points of entry and make sure that we are able to provide barricades, provide an ability for them to be able to process large numbers of migrants that will come in.
The men and women of the Border Patrol are very glad for the help, but they say in the long run, what they really need is a wall.
If you just look, I mean, to cut through this is going to take a lot more than it is to cut through with just, I could use my Leatherman, I could take it out, and I could cut through that. This, it's been repaired all the way through. It's just section after section like this where it's been cut.
By entering the United States at a place not designated as a port of entry, you are committing a crime. And we need to make sure that in the metropolitan areas we have the best barrier we can have to give us the right amount of time so that we can persuade people not to come across. And if not, then we can make a safe apprehension. It buys us time.
In the meantime, with more than 1,000 migrants a day attempting to cross the Rio Grande, the Border Patrol will take all the help they can get, and the U.S. military is answering the call. From El Paso, Texas, I'm Chuck Holton for CBN News.
Coming up, what if you lived out in the country and decided to put a pond on your property that's good for the environment? You fill out all the necessary government paperwork, then suddenly you find the Environmental Protection Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers say you can't do that and threaten you with enormous fines. So what happened to one Montana rancher is the very situation. We got the story when we come back. And welcome back to CBN NewsWatch. Imagine the federal government bringing all of its resources to bear against you, threatening millions of dollars in penalties and years in jail simply for building a pond on your own property. In an ongoing investigative series, CBN News has reported on the out-of-control system of federal crimes and regulations that could literally make us a nation of criminals. Today, CBN's Paul Strand introduces us to a Wyoming man who decided to fight back.
In 2011, Andy Johnson obtained all the necessary government paperwork before building this stock pond on his 8-acre ranch in Wyoming.
He worked with the state, the local government, got all the sign-offs he needed, and created a pond in his front yard.
And since we've built the stock pond, not only does our livestock benefit from it, but we've had eagles, we've had blue heron.
Former federal regulator Ray Cagle Jr. insists the pond benefited the environment.
It had the added benefit of creating quite a bit of nice habitat for fisheries, wildlife, waterfowl, and wetlands in general that were created because of the pond.
Johnson says it even filtered the water from 6 Mile Creek that he was using and made it cleaner. But none of that was good enough for the Army Corps of Engineers or the Environmental Protection Agency. The EPA demanded that Johnson dismantle the pond in 30 days in the dead of Wyoming winter or face serious fines because they said he'd done serious wrong. Jonathan Wood of the Pacific Legal Foundation.
He should have asked their permission first. And for having not done so, they demanded he remove the environmentally beneficial pond or pay up to $20 million in potential fines.
The EPA has came in and threatened to take everything that we've ever known.
More than his money was on the line.
Almost every environmental statute includes criminal provisions, so you could go to jail and face criminal fines for things that most of us take for granted on our own property, like moving dirt from one place to another.
The potential fines were about $37,500 a day and piled up into the millions because Johnson ended up in a long, hard fight against the feds.
We suffered many sleepless nights. We're still fighting the battle.
Johnson and his lawyers announced in 2015 they were suing the government over its treatment of the Johnson family.
And seeing what the EPA is doing to this family, it made me so angry.
How much power do we want to give unelected, unaccountable bureaucrats?
Wyoming's 2 senators wrote the EPA. The compliance order reads like a draconian edict of a heavy-handed bureaucracy.
It's just devastating to think that our government, the country that we live in, that I work so hard and pay taxes to, is now attacking us.
I think the thing that people connect with in the Andy Johnson story is he's just like all of us. He was doing something that most of us would probably do on our own property without even thinking about. And for doing that, the government threatened to ruin his life and his family's life.
The bureaucrats accused Johnson of violating the Clean Water Act and potentially affecting navigable waters they believed 6 Mile Creek fed.
Someone went to the computer on their desk, pulled up Google Maps, and based just on that, accused this man of violating the law.
Wyoming attorney Dan Frank points out how they made mistakes in reading the maps.
Had they ever gone out, they would have found that it dead ends in a canal and it doesn't ever reach a navigable water of the United States.
By just going by the map, they also mistook how the creek flowed.
They assumed the water was flowing uphill. If they had gone out and looked at the property, they would have found the water flowing the other direction.
The only thing that makes sense from my experience as a former federal regulator is that the government quite often, in my own personal experience, does things that don't make sense.
Given the mistakes his team uncovered, Johnson felt compelled to fight for as long as it took.
I decided that I was not going to tolerate our government telling us exactly what we can and can't do on our private property.
Ultimately, Johnson and his legal team won. The EPA backed down and gave up the fight. Wyoming Senator John Barrasso wrote after the government caved, "This settlement is a welcome rebuke of an agency that has gone too far."
The government has incredible leverage over you. They can ruin your life and ruin your family's future if you don't do whatever they say. That's why it was extremely brave of him to fight back and say, no, you've exceeded your power. I haven't done anything wrong.
In the end, the EPA didn't get even $1 from Johnson, and the pond still exists, still benefiting the environment, which you think the Environmental Protection Agency would appreciate. Paul Strand, CBN News, reporting from outside the EPA in Washington.
Coming up next, the government's new recommendation on exercise, and you don't necessarily have to go to the gym. We're going to tell you what the new guidelines say and why they're so easy to follow. You want to stick around for that. We've got it when we come back. The government has some new exercise advice, and it sounds pretty easy to follow. Move more and sit less. In other words, basically stay active. It is the first update since the government's physical activity guidelines came out a decade ago. Since then, exercise has been shown to have more and more benefits, and staying active can mean even little things like taking the stairs instead of the elevator. Doing something is better than doing nothing, I should say. And it is preventative medicine, one experts at Northwestern University say. Even short bursts of activities can be helpful, and too much sitting can be very harmful. Only 20% of Americans get enough exercise now. And with childhood obesity also on the rise today, the government is encouraging children as young as 3 also stay active, doing things like playing, and it helps to start good, healthy habits at a very early age. Well, right now, it is time for your Tuesday Tweetable, and here's a message I hope will inspire you, and perhaps you'll even post, tag, tweet, and share it with others. It is a great day to dig deep into God's Word. So why do I say that? Here's exactly why. The deeper the root, the greater the fruit. With that word, you should make this a terrific Tuesday. Dive deep into His Word. It will only produce greater fruit in your life. God promises to watch over every single syllable of His Word, so it will not return to Him void. That is going to do it for this edition of CBN NewsWatch. Our second half hour is coming up right here on the CBN News Channel. Today, we're going to have a look at how the MeToo movement against sexual abuse is affecting the church. And you can find more of our exclusive coverage throughout the day at cbnnews.com. We'd love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can always reach us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram.
This is CBN NewsWatch.
And thank you so much for joining us for this half hour of CBN NewsWatch. I'm Ephraim Graham. The California wildfire disaster is now the deadliest in state history, the death toll rising to 44 overnight. The search for bodies in Northern California tells the story of attempts at escape. Rescue personnel finding the dead or next to burned cars, apparently overcome by smoke and flames before they could actually get away.
I'm surrounded by fire. I'm surrounded by fire right now. I don't know what to do.
It was just constant explosions, and cars are trying to go around on the side and bursting into flames, and people are getting out of their burning cars and running down the middle of the road.
Statewide, there are more than 8,000 firefighters battling the wildfires, more than 7,000 structures destroyed, and roughly 325 square miles scorched between the Camp Fire burning in Northern California and the Woolsey Fire in Southern California. Actress Candice Bure is asking people to pray for those in the path of this unbelievable blaze. She posted, "It is no joke. Praying, praying, praying. Please pray with us. We need your prayers." She also shared a dramatic picture of people fleeing the fire and the blowing smoke covering the sky and California mountains. She also shared a video on Instagram showing her Bible open to Psalm 139 and reading it. She commented, "I needed this word today. Maybe you do too," finding comfort in God's word and sharing it with others.
Even before a word is on my tongue, behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You hem me in behind and before and lay your hand upon me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high, I cannot attain it. Where shall I go from your spirit?
Bure read that entire psalm, and many people posted their thanks and agreed they needed that word as well. I want to turn now to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. He met with his security cabinet to decide how to respond to what's being called the largest single-day attack ever. Gaza terrorists launched some 400 rockets at Israel. The Iron Dome anti-rocket system struck down about 100 of them, but some fell inside populated areas. CBN News Middle East Bureau Chief Chris Mitchell was there to report.
This is a building in Escalation that took a direct hit from one of the rockets fired out of Gaza about 12 miles to the south. You can see the walls that have been blown out. You can see this is the kitchen. You can see cookies in the cupboards. You can see the damage that had because of the rocket. A man in his 40s died because of this. 2 women were seriously injured. And this is just one of the hundreds of rockets that have been fired out of Gaza into Israel in the past 24 hours.
Israeli police say there are about 1 million Israelis affected by this current round of violence. Here now is a look at some of the other major stories we're following for you today inside the CBN newsroom. Democrat Kristen Sinema won Arizona's open U.S. Senate seat Monday, beating Republican Representative Martha McSally. The race between Sinema and McSally was one of the most closely watched in the nation during Arizona's large and lengthy vote count. Sinema declared victory Monday at a Scottsdale hotel, citing the example of John McCain, who died in August. She said she would try to follow his example and put country before party. U.S. analysts said Monday they've located 13 secret North Korean missile development sites. A report states satellite imagery shows an extensive network of weapons facilities used to produce missiles and related technology. North Korea analysts say the findings were not surprising, but were still cause for concern. They also noted Kim Jong-un has never agreed to halt either nuclear weapons or missile development in his negotiations with President Donald Trump. Tim Tebow will be the host of a 10-episode high-stakes physical competition show on CBS. During the $1 Million Mile, contestants will have a chance to win $1 million every time they run the course. Tebow says watching people compete at their highest ability is inspirational to him. Now you can find more on these stories and others throughout the day at cbnnews.com. Some cases before the Supreme Court in recent days have shown how it can have a profound influence on society. The High Court heard one case about a frog and another about a rumored graveyard, and both could matter when it comes to your private property rights. Paul Strand explains now from the High Court.
Two of the first cases the Supreme Court took up involve your private property rights and could affect what happens if government suddenly decides it wants a piece of your land. One case involves some private property in Louisiana and the endangered dusky gopher frog, which exists only in Mississippi. The government's taking 1,500 acres of Edward Pointavant's timber growing land in Louisiana because the endangered frog might have lived there many decades ago.
This frog is critically endangered, just about 100 of them left. And it used to be found across Louisiana, Alabama, and Mississippi.
But Pacific Legal Foundation lawyer Mark Miller argues this land grab will cost his client millions on a gamble the frog could maybe live there.
He'd be looking at $34 million in lost income, but that doesn't matter to the government.
It's over 1,500 acres, almost double the size of Central Park in New York.
Adkins says the land is perfect for the frogs. Pointavant says it needs a ton of money to prepare it.
The ponds there are in an ideal state. And when they're not in the ponds, they live in stump holes, and that land has the stump holes.
And it would take millions and millions and millions of dollars to recreate that habitat.
That's absolutely false.
Miller says the government shouldn't be able to just do this. It'd be like ripping up Manhattan skyscrapers because deer used to wander there when it was forest.
Let's declare Manhattan to be critical habitat for that deer, and then we'll just simply do whatever we got to do to protect that endangered deer in Manhattan.
The other case involves Pennsylvanian Rose Nick, whose 90-acre farm has been in her family for decades. But Scott Township has decided some stones on her land may be gravestones, and she has to fix up the area and leave it open to the public every day of the year, or be heavily fined, rather than compensated for this taking of her land. Attorney Christina Martin.
And if she didn't do that, they would fine her $300 to $600 per day.
Can you just imagine what it's like to have people every day on your property?
Nick wants a federal court to shoo the township away, but can't because of an old Supreme Court ruling that says she must first go through state courts before going federal when it comes to property rights. Martin says property rights should be just as important as your other constitutional rights.
And if you have no way of enforcing your rights, then your rights are sort of meaningless. It's just words on paper.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the Supreme Court.
Coming up, as the hashtag MeToo movement rocks the church, one pastor is confronting it head on by opening up about his own past. Stay with us. Welcome back. The MeToo movement set off seismic shockwaves across Hollywood, Wall Street, Washington, and even the church. CBN's John Jessup talked to a sexual abuse survivor who's on a mission to help victims see themselves in a different light.
Kim and Monty Weatherall enjoy spending time together, whether it's in church or working out at the gym. She's helped him tackle weight loss.
80 pounds, yes. I walked in there well over 300 and upwards of 320 pounds.
And also in dealing with a painful past.
When I got home and he told me what his plan was, it hit me like a ton of bricks.
I made a decision to end my life.
Monty resisted getting help because as a pastor, he's used to giving advice. Most people in his life know Pastor Monty as a young, dynamic preacher, always armed with an encouraging word. What they didn't know was for years, he wore many masks, projecting different personas to hide a painful secret.
From 4 to 7 years old, I was abused over those 3 years by 2 male relatives.
He never told anyone about the abuse, fearing retribution. Instead, Monty hid the pain, pretending to be someone else.
For the rest of my life, I began to play these different characters because I was so uncomfortable with being myself.
It worked until the only character left was the man in the mirror.
I didn't realize that on some level I was blaming myself, but I had to give myself permission to realize that it wasn't my fault. That suicidal spirit that was on me, it just broke. But I knew that the journey wasn't over.
The road to recovery started on the outside with a goal of getting in shape to lay a foundation for his emotional healing.
I think psychologically, as I am being, tortured as a child by the abusers, I tried to really just hide all of that. Being overweight, out of shape, I made a decision that a part of taking my life back, I had to take my body back.
Monty found a counselor and worked through difficult sessions, recalling those early childhood memories. And just like female victims, it took decades into adulthood to begin the process.
The majority of women that I see who are violated as a child really aren't ready to start the healing process till they're at least 30.
Sexual violence has got to go.
In the hashtag MeToo era, sexual abuse scandals have now hit evangelical circles with its own social media campaign, hashtag Church2.
I regretfully had a sexual incident with a female high school senior in the church.
Challenging as it may be, Wheeler believes these revelations can help churches do better to address sexual abuse and reach victims.
What we are seeing is the community as a whole starting to at least willing to talk about this conversation. We're seeing that churches are now, I think the Me Too movement is helping some pastors realize that, oh my gosh, we do have a lot of survivors in our churches, and what are we doing, and what can we do to help them heal?
That question is what motivates Monty Weatherall.
I know the shame, I know the courage that it took for those women and those men that are coming out to say this happened to me.
With so much interest in justice reform and redemption stories, he's concerned about neglecting the victim.
I'm glad that legislation is happening. I'm glad when authentic redemption has taken place. That's great, but we can't forget those boys, those girls, those men, those women that have been abused. And so I know why the Holy Spirit led me to write this book, for that reason.
That book, Taking My Life Back, documents how Monty went from suicidal thoughts
We are healed right now
to thriving and even forgiving his abusers.
For me, it started with a decision. I had to make a decision to forgive those that sexually abused me. And my abusers, they didn't know who I was going to become. They didn't know I would become a pastor that would help thousands. They didn't know I would even witness to them and lead them to Christ and baptize one of them.
For Kim, she says their marriage is stronger and they're happier than ever.
Sometimes I look at him and I don't even think it's the same person I married. He was wonderful then, but he's wonderful and healthy and whole now.
John Jessup, CBN News.
Jesus. Amen.
Reporting in Swansea, Illinois.
Still ahead, I traveled to the Today Show to talk with Kathy Lee Gifford about her children's book. Hear how she's inspiring children to find God's unique plan for their lives after this. Kathy Lee Gifford is a multi-talented entertainer. She's also an author with a new book in stores right now. The Gift That I Can Give is an inspiring work for children, but the message is certainly fitting for children at heart as well.
Hello, everybody! Wait, this was not my idea, by the way.
From making television,
my character, Annabelle, ends up here and meets Craig Ferguson's character.
To making movies.
Gonna love me to death.
To making music. Kathy Lee Gifford keeps busy, entertaining.
I just know that what I came out of the womb wanting to do is what I've spent my entire life doing.
Absolutely.
Putting on shows. And nobody could have interested me in a science project or a math equation. I wasn't going to go there. Let's stop making our kids go there when God already has a plan for their life that is already beautiful for them.
Inspiring little ones to find God's beautiful plan for them is at the heart of her latest work. The Gift That I Can Give is Gifford's fourth children's book. Its poetic pages read, "Maybe my gift is just to be kind, by taking care of the stray animals I find. And could my gift be a wonderful thing, like having the talent to dance and sing?" We sat down with Kathy Lee in New York City on the set of NBC's Today Show to discuss this passion project.
What your children love doing right now when they're little, I believe is what they're meant to do.
Did you see that in your own children?
Yes, Totally.
Wow.
Completely. Both of them are excellent writers. My son now got his master's degree from Oxford University in screenwriting, and he's got like 7 projects going in Hollywood right now. You can't stop him. Cassidy wanted to be an actress, and she was a tiny little girl, and she's done 9 movies, new series coming out. They're doing what they love doing. And I don't want my children to do what I want them to do. I want them to do what they want to do. You know, we hover too much. If we've raised them in the way they should go, then we need to release them to soar on the wings of the wind with the Lord, not keep holding them on, you know, and making them into what we want. God's got a better plan for our children than we do.
I love the way the book even begins, essentially saying that as I'm reading it, I hear the scripture, you're fearfully and wonderfully made.
Right.
Like, there's no one like you.
The uniqueness,
Be you.
exactly.
Be you.
Yeah, I think there's a tendency in our world to cookie cutter people. I went to different places in my life where people wanted me to just fit into the mold. I don't think we're supposed to fall into place. I think we're supposed to stand out, really. But if God went to so much trouble to make snowflakes individual, not one snowflake out of the gazillions and gazillions of them is alike under a microscope, then we certainly aren't. The masterpiece of his creation is the human being. And the first letter in unique is the word you, or the letter U, the letter U. And we tell children that at an early age, that builds up, wow, I'm that special to God, that he went to so much trouble to make me special so I can do special things in this world. Not so I can win Grammys, not so I can have a lot of money in the bank. Those things may happen, but they'll happen as a byproduct of you following God's path for your life.
At the same time, the fierce army of the Philistines.
The biblical story of young David defeating Goliath inspired Kathy Lee's children's musical, The Little Giant. And now this book.
There's a song in it at the very end called What is Your Stone? And that's basically the question we should be asking our children, not what do you want to be when you grow up, just what has God already made you to be?
So grab your stone and throw it well.
One of the underlying message, or maybe the greatest theme in this, is finding your gift is not just for you, it's really for those around you.
That's right. It isn't for us. We live in a me generation. We live in a where's mine generation. I'm entitled to this, I'm entitled to that. We're not entitled to anything. Even the breath we breathe every moment of our day is a gift from God. And we should be grateful. We should be grateful people, not entitled people. And I have to remind myself of that every day too, believe me. There are a few people in this room that spent a lot of years with me and they're going, Mama, don't preach. But yeah, and even if you're not the smartest person you know, if you're not the most beautiful person you've ever laid eyes on, if you're not you don't fit into certain molds, that's praise God, because you're not supposed to. But here's the thing, there is one thing that every single one of us can give, and that's the way our book ends, no matter what your circumstances are. And that is the gift of God's love. You can give a smile. Children understand that. You can have a lemonade stand and help a family that's been falling on hard times in your own neighborhood. Start there. Start in little ways. Let God show you a need in the world, and let him lead you to a way to help people with that. You can rescue animals. You can be a good player on a team and give the ball to somebody else when you know you could make it over the finish line. That kid's never made it over the finish line. Let him have it. Those kinds of things. It's really quite a simple message. Sometimes those are the ones we trip over.
Kathy Lee is living that giving message with her book, donating the proceeds to Child Help, a nonprofit organization working to prevent and treat victims of child abuse.
Kathy Lee Gifford still hard at work. We'll have more on the movie as she gets closer to releasing that. By the way, the book once again is called The Gift That I Can Give. It is available to you wherever books are sold, and it is certainly a good read for you and your child. Stay with us, we'll be right back. As the media spotlights Florida's recount of the Senate and governor's races, residents of Florida's Panhandle are still picking up the pieces weeks after one of the most powerful storms to hit the United States. Operation Blessing quickly moved in following the storm to help survivors to rebuild their lives. Our George Thomas is on the story.
After Hurricane Michael completely decimated Mary Everett's home and this neighborhood in Panama City, she, like so many others, is counting her blessings to be alive. When the third strongest hurricane in U.S. recorded history hit, Everett said she knew the Lord was protecting her, even as walls of her home were caving in all around her.
I was such at peace. That's probably the most peace I have ever felt in my life. Like I said, I knew I was going to be okay.
40 students from the University of Alabama decided to use their fall break to join Operation Blessing disaster relief teams as they canvassed Everett's neighborhood, removing debris, passing out hot meals, and personal hygiene kits.
I just want to help. That's why I'm down here.
While Meyer's crew worked on removing tree limbs and trying to salvage bits and pieces of Everett's life, Stephanie Robinson and members of her local church volunteered to join OB cleanup teams not too far away, going house to house, trying to repair, restore, and replace belongings. That included Robinson's own home, which was wrecked in the storm. While she was out ministering with OB to other hurting homeowners, Operation Blessing teams were busy trying to make her home livable.
When you don't feel like you can stand up and keep yourself up, and they hold your arms up and they bring supplies in, they meet every need they can possibly meet that is within the realm of what they can do.
With power still down in many places and supplies low, Operation Blessing partnered with Snyder's of Hanover to deliver food and other essential items to victims of Hurricane Michael, giving people hope that even in the hardest times, others will come and help shoulder the burden. George Thomas, CBN News.
And you can learn more about Operation Blessing by visiting its website, that is ob.org. It is time now for your Tuesday Tweetable, and here's a message I hope will inspire you and perhaps even move you to post, tag, tweet, and share it with others. It is a great day to dig deep into God's Word. Why do I say that? Here's why. The deeper the root, the greater the fruit. With that word, make this a terrific Tuesday. That will do it for this half hour of CBN NewsWatch. Remember, you can find more of our exclusive coverage of the issues you care most about always at cbnnews.com. We'd also love to know what you think about the stories you've seen here today. You can do that by emailing newswatch@cbn.com. And of course, you can reach out and touch us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Hope you'll join us again right here next time. Make this a terrific Tuesday. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.